Going to go ahead and call this session of the City of Issaquah Hearing Examiner to order. For the record, today is April 22nd, 2021 at 2 p.m. We have one item on the agenda today. This is numbers PP 180003 and VAR 200001, a request for preliminary plat approval to subdivide a 4.9 acre site into 20 single-family residential lots using cluster housing provisions of the municipal code, along with the associated infrastructure and appurtenances. And this relates to property off the west side of Mine Hill Road Southwest in the Squaw Mountain sub-area of the city. In addition, the applicant seeks approval of a critical areas variance to install stormwater and other utility infrastructure within required critical area buffers. My name is Andrew Reeves. I'm a hearing examiner with Sound Law Center, who the city has selected to hold certain land use application hearings like this one. And today it will be my role to collect evidence in the form of exhibits and testimony to determine whether this proposal complies with the city's comprehensive plan, zoning ordinances, critical areas ordinances, and the specific criteria for approval of a preliminary plat under the municipal code, as well as our state subdivision act, which is in chapter 5817 of the revised code of Washington. And in addition, to ensure the proposal complies with the criteria for approval for a critical areas variance. To that end, I received 28 exhibits in advance of the hearing today that I have an opportunity to review. These included my notes, the application materials themselves, including project narratives addressing the criteria for approval for both the preliminary plat and the critical areas variance. Information about the notice that went out in relation to today's hearing, as well as the application, information on the environmental review that occurred under our state's Environmental Policy Act, and the MDNS, or Mitigated Determination of Non-Significance, that was issued for the proposal. Several reports of a technical nature, including information on geotechnical characteristics of the site, soils, the drainage associated with the site, critical areas reports, studies on traffic, and other technical studies. One comment I believe that came in related to the State Environmental Policy Act determination from Fish and Wildlife, and about, looks like 15 or 20 comments from members of the public, most of which expressed concerns about density, about the environment and removal of trees on site, and drainage, as well as traffic. So I'm going to go ahead and admit those 28 exhibits into the record. Should anyone have additional exhibits they'd like admitted into the record, let me know when it's your opportunity to testify, and I'll go ahead and address submitting additional exhibits at that time. Speaking of testimony, all testimony today will be under oath or affirmation. That's because we're my decision to be appealed under our state's Land Use Petition Act. The recording of today's hearing, as well as the admitted exhibits and my decision, would serve as the foundation for any such appeal. I may and often do ask questions of those that are testifying. I'm not trying to trip anyone up. I'm just trying to ensure I have a thorough understanding of the proposal, so that within 10 business days of the record closing, I'm able to produce a decision that is hopefully clear and legally defensible. Finally, the order that I believe we're going to follow today is, first, I'll swear in city staff, who will give an overview of the proposal and any recommendations that the city has. Then we'll turn briefly to the applicant to see if they have any additional information they would like to share to ensure I have all the necessary information. Then we'll turn to members of the public who are interested in testifying, and members of the public will have an opportunity to testify. When we get to that point, there won't be an opportunity to ask questions, but if you have a question you're hoping to get additional information on, you can say, I am so-and-so. I'm hoping someone can provide additional information about traffic. I'll take furious notes, and at the end, after all members of the public have had an opportunity to testify, I'll turn it back to the applicant team as well as city staff to hopefully get answers to those questions. So that's the order we're going to follow. I thank everyone for taking the time to be here. You will remain muted until called upon by me, but everyone will have an opportunity to testify. So just wanted to make that clear, and with that, I think we can get started. So I believe Valerie Porter is going to be presenting on behalf of city staff today, so we'll get her sworn in first. Ms. Porter, do you swear affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
Great, thank you for being here. And if you can just clearly spell your name for the record, I'm trying to be better about this, that would be great.
Yes, Valerie, Valerie, and Porter is Porter.
Thank you. And your role with the city, Ms. Porter?
I'm an associate planner.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Porter. Thank you for being here.
Great, thank you. Candy, are you going to switch over the host? Great, thank you.
And before you dive right in, Ms. Porter, I did get some exhibits that came in just a couple hours ago. Was 28 the number that you had as the
Yes.
correct number? And then did you want to make this PowerPoint presentation an exhibit?
I do.
Okay, so why don't we make it exhibit 29? And then I don't believe the staff report has an exhibit number. So why don't we make that exhibit 30?
Great.
Does that work for you?
Yep.
Okay, go right ahead. I'll try to not interrupt as much.
Totally fine. Thank you. As I stated, my name is Valerie Porter, and I'm an associate planner here with the city to talk about Mine Hill Creek plat. A request is being made from Boardwalk Real Estate on behalf of the property owners for a preliminary plat and a critical area variance. There we go. All right, so before I get into the proposal, I'd like to discuss the site location. As previously stated, the project is located on the west side of Mine Hill Road in Squaw Mountain sub area. The parcel is zoned single-family suburban, and it is classified as low residential as in the city's comprehensive plan, and the proposal is consistent with the comp plan. So the project site is comprised of two existing single-family homes. Together, they total approximately 4.9 acres. Majority of the site is undeveloped, but each parcel does have one single-family home and one shed. In addition, parcel 1 has a detached garage and an abandoned dwelling unit on the west side of the stream with the driveway that connects from the structure to Mine Hill Road. So a request is being made to subdivide the two parcels into 20 single-family residential lots. The two existing homes will remain in their current location, but one lot is being added in between the homes. These three lots will gain primary access from Mine Hill Road. The remaining lots will gain access from a right-of-way extension that connects to Clark Street, which is to the north of the site. The project is also proposing to widen Mine Hill Road, construct internal roadways throughout the development, install utilities to service the development, which is the reason why the applicant is requesting a critical area variance. Public notification was distributed to the community as outlined in the Issaquah Municipal Code. Prior to the plat application being submitted, a neighborhood meeting was held in November of 2018. Once the preliminary plat application was deemed complete, a notice of application was sent to surrounding property owners. Notices were sent out for the critical area as request as well. Several public comments were received. And the copies of the comments can be seen in Exhibit 26, and staff responses are in the staff report under Section 9. A SEPA determination was issued on February 12th, 2021, and this initiated the combined comment and appeal period. A copy of the determination can be viewed under Exhibit 6. One comment was provided, but was not in the staff report. Again, a copy was provided to the hearing examiner before the meeting, and that is Exhibit 28. Great. Prior to this meeting notices were distributed to surrounding property owners, to the parties of records, and posted in the Seattle Times. No additional comments were received between this time. So the proposed project is utilizing the cluster housing provisions. Minimum lot size does not apply, and setbacks and impervious surface requirements are applied to the entire site, not the individual lots. The project's compliance with district standards will be reviewed in greater detail by staff once the project moves into the construction phase. So before I discuss the variance, I'm going to talk about some of the site encumbrances, which will kind of help show why there's the need for the variance. So there are several critical areas throughout the project site. The applicant is avoiding direct contact to these critical areas, but they are proposing to impact the buffer area. So there's streams and wetlands on the site. So along the front end of the project is a class 2 stream, which is highlighted in blue, and the buffer is in red. As you can see, the stream bisects the project site into east and west parts. The stream has a buffer width that has been reduced from 75 feet to 56.25 feet, which is allowed per code. I'd like to bring your attention to a few things. The first one is how the stream buffer extends beyond the property into Mine Hill Road. The second is that the existing home on Lot 1 is in the stream buffer, and that the third is the access way between Mine Hill Road and the proposed Road A. Due to the stream alignment and past code regulations, the home on Lot 1 is currently located in the stream buffer and currently doesn't comply with current code regulations. So to bring the parcel into compliance in the most practical and feasible manner, and to lessen the home's encroachment into the buffer, the applicant is reducing the buffer through buffer averaging. In addition, the project has also created buildable area outside of the stream buffer. So should the home be redeveloped, it will not be located within the buffer. There is an existing driveway that connects Mine Hill Road to the abandoned structure that's located on the west side of the stream. The applicant is proposing to remove the abandoned structure and convert majority of the driveway into a pedestrian trail and run utilities along this trail, which is considered a existing permanent impact. Impacts to the stream buffer will be mitigated per code and reviewed by staff. So there's a second stream that is located in between lots 4 and 5, and it's also highlighted red. This little stream is classified as a class 4 stream with a 25-foot buffer. The applicant is proposing to utilize buffer averaging to alter the shape of the buffer to avoid potential impacts, which is allowed per code. And so there's also a category 3 wetland that's located on the site, and it's found directly west of Mine Hill Creek, and that is highlighted in green. All of the critical areas that we're going to be talking about today, with the exception of the coal mine hazard areas, are going to be placed in a native growth protection easement or a tract and will remain undeveloped forever. So now we're going to talk about the steep slopes. The site contains steep slopes. One is regulated by city code and the others are exempt. Exempt slopes are not regulated by city code, which so they must either have been created through previous legal grading activities as part of the approved development proposal, or have slopes 40% or steeper with a great vertical elevation change up to 20 feet. 5 steep slopes areas have been identified to impact the site, which are the dark gray areas located on the map. All of the steep slope areas have been deemed exempt except for one, which is highlighted in red and is located directly west of Mine Hill Creek. This slope, along with slopes 2 through 4, regardless of their exemption status, will be placed in the native growth protection easement due to their close proximity to the stream. The site also is impacted by critical coal mine hazard areas. A preliminary coal mine hazard report was prepared stating that coal mine hazard areas are beneath the project site. The report went on to state that majority of the site has been deemed declassified, but there is an area in the southeast corner of the site that has been classified as moderate coal mine area. And this area is going to impact lots 2 and 3, and you can see it's highlighted in red. Moderate coal mine hazard areas can be developed but pose significant risk of property damage and require special engineering or architectural recommendations. The preliminary coal mine hazard study has proposed mitigation measures which staff supports, but a more site-specific review will occur once the project moves into the construction phase. Now I'll be talking about site access. So of the 20 lots, 3 of the lots will gain primary access from Mine Hill Road. They're currently not being shown, but I wanted to point out that the applicant is proposing frontage improvements to Mine Hill Road, which include widening the narrow road to 20 feet to allow for emergency vehicle access. And they're also going to be adding about 2 to 3 parallel parking stalls along the road to address parking concerns. Primary access to lots 4 through 20 will be gained from the right-of-way extension that connects to Clark Street, which is highlighted in yellow. This area is unbuilt city right-of-way. This route has been selected to avoid impacting the stream and other critical areas. And as the roadway goes further south and enters into the development, it will become privately owned and maintained, and that area is highlighted in blue. So for access throughout the development, the project is proposing to construct 2 internal roads, Road A and Road B. So per city code, subdivisions are required to provide non-motorized walkways within a development to link to schools, common areas, open spaces, transit stops, and public streets. All of the newly constructed roads will have sidewalks to safely link residents to public streets. In addition, the project is also proposing to convert the existing driveway to a pedestrian trail, which is not currently shown, but it would also provide a pedestrian connection to Mine Hill Road as well as to the open space that is being proposed over the stormwater vault right over here. So the applicant is requesting a critical area variance. A variance is being requested to allow utilities to encroach more than 25% into the critical area buffer. According to city's critical area code, utilities shall not encroach into stream buffers more than 25% of the standard buffer width or use more than 25% of the total buffer area without a variance. The project is proposing to install sewer and water utilities along the trail and install 2 stormwater outfalls that will discharge directly into Mine Hill Creek. As you can see from the image, the activities will occur within the stream buffer. The preliminary plat has been designed with the utilities in the desired location. The 2 outfalls are highlighted in orange and the water and sewer are highlighted in green. Should the request not be approved, modifications will need to be made to the design. Approval of the variance is dependent on the project meeting the separate approval criteria, which are listed here. Staff has provided detailed responses in the staff report. At this time, I'm not going to get into each criteria, but I'm going to briefly speak on the project's challenges and why staff supports the request. And just so that we are all on the same page, I'm going to go back a slide. So there are a few factors that are triggering the need for this variance. One is code requirements. City code requires that every parcel be adequately served by essential facilities and services, and water lines be looped for safety and redundancy. Utility mains are currently exist in Mine Hill Road, and the driveway is an existing impact. So to serve the plat, the project is proposing to convert the driveway into a trail and run utilities along it. Another requirement is the stormwater code. So by adding a lot to Mine Hill, this is requiring the project to come into compliance with current stormwater regulations, which means addressing stormwater for lots 1, 2, and 3. Mine Hill Road does not currently have a stormwater system or conveyance. So to comply with city requirements, the applicant is proposing to install stormwater outfalls to address the stormwater along Mine Hill Road, as well as within the development. Another factor Another factor is the site condition specifically the topography and the stream alignment. Um, Steep slopes are located within the stream's ravine. Placing stormwater outfalls at the top of the slope would undermine the stability of the slope, causing erosion, landslides, and other steep slope failures. Also, due to the Mine Hill Creek's alignment, the stream buffer on Mine Hill Road extends onto Mine Hill Road, excuse me. So any work done in the right of way would, be placed in the inner 25% of the buffer. So if the project were to strictly comply with city code, which means placing the utilities at the top of the slope, this would result in impacts to the adjacent property to the north. It would also trigger or require more trees to be removed from the site and create additional impacts to the critical area buffer and possibly undermine the stability of the slope. Staff supports the request because the proposed design is the least environmentally damaging and impacting proposal. And considering all of the factors, granting approval would not result in special privilege. With that being said, staff recommends approval of the critical area variance and the Mine Hill Creek preliminary plat, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report. Perhaps this time, take some questions.
Great, thank you, Ms. Porter. I guess if we start backward, if you could just go back to the critical areas variance slide that you had there. So the two orange areas are the outfalls for the stormwater. So
Correct.
we've got essentially two systems. We've got the west side goes to tract B, and then the stormwater outfall is that orange one in the middle. Is that accurate?
Yes, there's two stormwater outfalls. Both will be located in tract, well, one majority of the one here is going to be in tract A, but the stormwater vault is going to be in tract B. It's going to be
Right.
connected to that.
And the second outfall is for the lots that are along Mine Hill Road. Is that right?
Yes, it's for addressing stormwater along Mine Hill.
Okay, so I guess my first question when I looked at the site plan was was any consideration given to putting not the stormwater facilities, but the other utilities, the sewer and electric, water, whatever, in the internal road and then routing it up to Clark Road so that you would avoid the critical area entirely? Was that
Yes.
practical?
Yes, so the mains are located in Mine Hill Road. And so if the applicant were to kind of run them along this side, again, it would possibly undermine the stability of the slopes. It would create additional impacts to this property owner, and additional trees would need to be removed from the site.
Well, I guess my question, if you go back a few slides, Ms. Porter, so I can see this part. Well, the one you were on just a second ago is the one I was looking for. No, it was the one that has the blue, shows the road connection from Clark. That one.
This one. Okay.
I guess my thinking was, are there not mains within Clark? Because I guess the thought I had was, why wouldn't you run the utilities up this new private road and then connect to the mains in Clark and avoid the critical area entirely? But is there no infrastructure in Clark Street? I guess is my question.
I believe the applicant will also be required to run utilities this way. So there's a code requirement that states that utilities should be looped for redundancy. And
Okay.
so they're in both locations.
Okay, so I think I understand. Okay. Great, thank you for clarifying that. While we're talking about critical areas, an exhibit that came in today, Exhibit 28, was the Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife had specific concerns about how the Mine Hill Creek was designated as not having salmonids because of their concern appeared to be that there's some sort of fish blockage, which is very common historically in the city. But in terms of how to designate it, they argue that the correct way to designate it is treat it as if there were salmonids, because theoretically that culvert or whatever the blockage is could be removed. There have been several such projects in Issaquah in the last 5 years or so. Did staff give any consideration to that comment? Would it have any impacts if the stream were treated as a fish-bearing stream? Would that change the required buffers? Just wanted to get some clarification on that.
Yeah, so staff did take that into consideration. I think the main part for us was that their comment was talking about how the stream could potentially, like in the future, be fish passable, and how our code is written, we have to assess the critical area how it is today. We also had the reports peer reviewed by a third party, and they too came up with the same assessment, which is that we cannot review the project for future uses. Although, it's great to consider those things, we have to assess it how it is today and how the code is written.
Okay, so the way that the city interprets its own municipal code is that you don't account for potential to fix these past fish barriers, if you will. You just have to look at how it is now and make the assessment in the moment.
Correct.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Sorry, just writing everything down here. Next, could you just clarify, so the SEPA and the MDNS, the optional process was not used, meaning notice wasn't provided of SEPA with the application materials. It was independent. Did I
Correct.
understand that right?
Correct.
And can you just clarify, I don't believe I had any affidavit or anything about how notice of SEPA was provided, but could you speak to how notice of SEPA was provided?
Yes, a notice was sent to the Seattle Times, making people aware of the project, and then it was also sent via email to all of the Fish and Wildlife tribes and parties of record.
Okay, so notice was provided in the newspaper and it was sent to reviewing departments and agencies?
Yes, and then it was also posted on the Seattle city's active projects list.
Posted on the city's website. Okay, so then in staff's view, notice in relation to SEPA was provided consistent with the municipal code requirements?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so we talked about that. We got all the exhibits. Okay. So then the timing, normally with a preliminary plat, there's the 90-day shot clock. Clearly the world fell apart. A lot of things happened. But here we have the plat application being deemed complete back on March 22nd of 2019, and the critical areas variance being complete on July 8 of 2020, correct?
Correct.
Okay, just want to check, has the municipal code been altered or changed or amended, or the comprehensive plan in any way since the plat application was deemed complete that would have an impact on this proposal?
The code was slightly changed. So there was a couple of factors that kind of extended the timeline. One was, I think, kind of working out some of the challenges on the site, like addressing tree retention and things like that. So there was a little bit of back and forth with staff and the applicant. The code was revised to we have an environmental board, and so projects like this that are level 2 and above that are impacted by critical areas are required to have environmental neighborhood meetings. And so before we could come have this hearing, we had to have an environmental meeting, which was held on March 31st.
Right, and notice materials about that meeting, and I hadn't recalled seeing that. So that was something new in the city of Issaquah, is that right?
Yes, it is. It's something new, I think, as of December 2020.
Okay, so and then obviously COVID, may have impacted some of these things, but so I guess the vesting question is, did the code change in any way that impacted zoning requirements or any other requirements associated with this proposal?
No.
Okay, and so and same with critical areas. There's a ongoing debate. A lot of folks think critical areas provisions, there is no vesting, but it didn't change. There's no impact in relation to or there have been no changes to the city's critical areas ordinance since the critical areas variance was deemed complete.
Nope, not to my knowledge.
Okay, I don't have to deal with vesting. That's the important thing. That's what you're telling me.
I hope not.
Okay, me too. So no vesting issues. That's great. Okay. Just check a couple, and then I assume that what happened was the plat came in, it was deemed complete because, you know, it's sort of an iterative process. And then later, after back and forth review by staff, it was determined that critical areas variance was necessary, and that's why this happened in the way that it did. Is that
Correct.
accurate? Okay. That makes sense. Okay, so we already talked about the MDNS. Let's see. Okay, zoning, I think there's, what is the zoning on the property? Because there were two different designations I saw in the staff report. Are we in the SRS or the SRE zoning district?
Single family suburban.
SRS, okay. SRS zoning district.
You mean SFS, single family?
Sorry, what, I'll let you tell me. What is the zoning district that is applicable in this situation?
It's single family suburban.
Is that SFS?
Yes,
Okay, sorry.
SFS.
All right. SFS is the correct zoning. Okay. I assume this was sent to the Issaquah School District and they didn't provide any comments, but could you just briefly speak to safe walking routes, or will there be a bus stop? I know that, you know, we've got the 3 lots in one location and the other 17 in a different location, but could you just explain the thinking on where students would go and how that would work?
Yes, I'm gonna quickly look through my slides and see if there's maybe a better. So the applicant's proposing the trail. So the idea would be that pedestrians would be able to walk through the site to get to Mine Hill Road, and that they would, once they get to the very corner of the site here, it's right at the kind of the edge of their property, and it's next to a driveway. And so they'd cross the driveway, and then there's a sidewalk, and then they would walk down to the main road. And that's our understanding as to where the school district will have a bus stop. We've asked them if they're going to propose to go down Mine Hill Road, and they said no due to the narrowness of the site. So folks will be able to safely walk down to the main street and then a trail beyond that.
Okay, so the 3 lots that are along Mine Hill Road, the idea is those students walk to the main intersection, the main portion of the plat, and then there's theoretically going to be a bus stop or something somewhere along Road A. Is that the idea?
No, the school district would not actually come into the development.
Okay,
They would have a
Clark.
it wouldn't be Clark. I believe it's further down, like closer to Wildwood, or I'm blanking on the main street.
Can you just
Valerie, would you go to the context slide? That may be easier to point to the pieces that you're identifying.
Thank you, Ms. Lemon. I was about to suggest that.
There's here's a driveway, and then as they continue to go further north, there's a sidewalk that then brings them down to the main road. That's our understanding as to where the school district picks up kids. We've talked to them about this project and others along Mine Hill Road, and they have no proposal to actually come into the development or on Clark Street.
Okay, so all the students from the 17 homes, if there are any, they will walk on the trail over to Mine Hill Road, walk up Mine Hill Road, which then there's another road somewhere off the plat here that's theoretically
Correct.
where the bus stop goes. Okay,
Correct.
thank you. Thank you for explaining that. Okay. All right, keep going on my notes here. At one point, just want to clarify, I believe most of the materials have the wetland as a category 3 wetland. I think one portion of the staff report referenced it as a category 2, but is category 3 the correct categorization?
I believe so.
Page 11 it said category 2 and page 13 said category 3.
Good to know. Yeah, no, it should be category 3.
Category 3. Okay. Let's see. Okay, and then wrapping my head around how the steep slope regulations work. So if a slope is steep because of an approved previous development, it's then sort of not natural and therefore not considered a steep slope. Is that the basic concept, i.e. it's not regulated?
Correct. If it occurred due to grading for so I guess like the best way to explain it is along here there's, a steep slope and there's homes along this area. So when they were kind of let's say building this area or building a road and it created a steep slope, it would not be considered a regulated steep slope. It would be exempt because it was created due to like the construction of the road.
Due to development. Okay,
Right.
so they're essentially not natural features.
Right.
And so they're not considered steep slopes. Okay, I think I get that. And then just to clarify, but there was a deviation request from the city standards related to Mine Hill Road. I am not responsible for making a determination. That's an administrative determination that was made by city staff, correct?
Correct.
Okay, just want to make sure. Let's see. At one point, there's discussion of an HPA being required. Do we happen to know the status of that or what's going on with that?
The applicant hasn't, to my knowledge, hasn't reached out to Fish and Wildlife applying for an HPA. Staff believes one will be required, but it's regulated by the state. So if one is required, then they'd get one, and if one wasn't, it would be they wouldn't get one.
Okay, so the thinking is this is the sort of first step of a proposal. If this were approved, then ultimately the HPA or hydraulic project approval would be required for sort of in-water work, I assume related to the outfall proposed off Mine Hill Road, and ecology would have to approve it. If they didn't approve it, then that'll have major implications to figuring out if this is possible, and eventually we might have to come back and do something different. But the idea is currently, it's not at that stage of review yet. Is that right?
It's not at that stage, and again, like, well, actually, I think I should let Stacy Rush speak to the stormwater.
Okay. Sorry, who is going to be speaking to stormwater?
Stacy Rush.
Okay, I didn't see the name on my list here. So there it is. Okay, so why don't we get Ms. Rush sworn in? And Ms. Rush, do you swear
Yes.
to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Could you just clearly spell your name for the record?
Yes, it's Stacy, Stacey. Last name is Rush, Rush.
Great, thank you. And your role at the city, Ms. Rush?
I'm a civil engineer in the development services, and I mainly focus on stormwater reviews and floodplain.
Great, thank you for being here. And so if you can speak to sort of
I need to have the question again because I didn't understand what I'm supposed to speak to.
I was just wondering on timing. I had noted in my notes that there would be likely an HPA would be required down the road.
Yeah.
But the thinking is the first stage, we're in the preliminary stage. So you've reviewed the proposal and the stormwater from a preliminary standpoint, an overview standpoint. But I assume there's 2 additional reviews. You'll have to do a final review of the stormwater plan, and then Department of Ecology will give a review if an HPA is required. Is that accurate?
Actually, well, Fish and Wildlife reviews, they issue the HPAs, not
Okay.
ecology. So just to clarify, that's fine.
Great.
And yeah, this is typical because the stormwater design is all preliminary under land use. And when we actually get to construction permits, that's when they'll need to submit the HPA. It's kind of hard because until they have a finished design, they can't really submit it to Fish and Wildlife for the HPA. So that's why we list it as a condition under land use that they need to talk with Fish and Wildlife, but we won't get all that information until during construction permits.
Got it. Great. Thank you.
The HPA is primarily triggered by if you do a new outfall to the creek, that's what triggers hydraulic project approval.
Right. Okay. So it's for the new outfall into Mine Creek. I guess there's 2, but
Yes.
okay. Did you have any further thoughts you wanted to share on stormwater? And let me make sure I didn't have any other questions. So Issaquah uses the 2012, I assume with the 2014 updates to the DOE manual for stormwater, and then 2017 addendums or whatever that the city specifically has promulgated. Is that right?
Yes, the 2017 is the addendum to the adopted stormwater design manual.
Okay. Just make sure I didn't have specific additional questions on that issue. I do not believe I had additional questions specifically on stormwater at the moment. So thank you, Ms. Rush.
Okay.
A couple more, Ms. Porter, for you. Looking at if you're the right person or someone else is, I was looking at the original critical areas report from Aquatica Consulting, and they assess the wetland based on the 1987 manual, but do you have any idea? That seems quite old as a wetland rating system. I don't know if we have someone from Aquatica. I know it was peer reviewed by multiple parties, but that stuck out at me as potentially problematic. Do you have any information on that, Ms. Porter? I don't know if you're muted or.
I am muted.
There we go.
No, I do not. Maybe the applicant can speak to this.
Okay, so we'll hold off on that. And then I think the final question I had for you, Ms. Porter, looking at the recommended conditions, there's a required notice of title related to the critical areas other than the coal hazard area. I guess my question is for the coal hazard area and the 3 lots or 2 lots that'll be impacted, is there any requirement that something gets recorded on the title that says this is a potential hazard? I didn't see anything, excuse me, in the proposed conditions.
I believe they are required to put something on the plat. It doesn't really speak to that in our code. We defer to King County.
Okay. Great. Okay, did you have anything further you wanted to share, Ms. Porter, or anyone else on staff you wanted to call at the moment? I assume once we hear from members of the public, there are some members of staff with expertise that might also be called on, but anything before we turn to the applicant?
No, I have nothing else to add.
Okay, thank you. So on behalf of the applicant, is it going to be Ken Lyons or someone else? I know there's several folks. Mr. Lyons, are you leading the charge here?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. Do you want to swear us all in at once, or do you just want to swear me in and then as I introduce to others? How would you prefer?
Yeah, why don't we do it one at a time? Otherwise, I'm going to get lost. So I'll swear you in, Mr. Lyons. Do you swear for him to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
Great. Thank you for being here, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. If it's all right, can I share my screen? It just might be helpful to have a few visuals.
I have no issue. I think Candy Bear is going to have to make you. There we go. I think it. Go ahead.
So you're able to see my screen?
Sure. And is this something you wanted in the record, or is this just for demonstrative purposes?
I think it repeats some of the information. I think that Ms. Porter from the city has already submitted to the record. If you would like it to admit as a separate exhibit, we certainly can. Or if you want to wait and see, if we actually use anything from it, that's fine as well. I'll defer to your judgment.
Okay, let's just make it Exhibit 31. And then, Mr. Lyons, can you just clearly spell your name for the record?
Yes, my name is Ken Lyons, K-E-N, last name Lyons, L-Y-O-N-S.
Great, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. Well, first of all, I want to just express my appreciation to certainly the city staff, Ms. Porter, as well as Ms. Parolo, certainly Stacy, Ms. Rush, and others for just a very, very thorough and well-developed staff report, and really appreciate all the time and effort they put in here. It is because of the staff report's completeness and all the exhibits that have been submitted that I'll try to keep my comments relatively brief so that we can make sure we focus on the questions that you might have. So again, my name is Ken Lyons, and I represent the property owners. In this case, Colleen Peterson, who lives in 345 Mine Hill Road, Southwest. She's unable to be here today. And then we also have Don and Jody McFerrin. I believe that they actually might be attending as well. And they own the property at 375 Mine Hill Road Southwest. Colleen, it is interesting. She lives in the house 345 Mine Hill Road, and she actually came from a mining family. That actually one of the founding families of that of Issaquah, as well as on that street. And she's lived there for 75 years. So she's been there for certainly quite some time. I'll introduce, if I can, just the project team, just to make sure we have it here. So again, I was the primary contact, and then we had a team of consultants that provided the various disciplines that are required for review of the preliminary plat process. That includes the project engineer, Mark Judy from DR Strong Consulting Engineers is here. We have for critical areas, we have Teresa Opolka from Aquatica Environmental Consulting. It sounds like you had a question that might be helpful for her to answer later. We have an arborist, Susan Prince from Creative Landscape Solutions here. We have two gentlemen here from Issaquah Creek Engineers. We have Brian Beeman, as well as Jeff Schwartz, and they handle the geotechnical reviews of the project, as well as the mine hazard study that also occurred on the site. And then we also have Curtis Chin here with Transportation Engineering Northwest, and they were our traffic consultant that we retained at the request of the city. We do believe the project has significant benefits for the community. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan policies that promote the development of housing with a variety of types of housing while protecting important environmental resources. It does protect the historic character of Mine Hill Road Southwest. We can talk about the history of the project, but there's been several iterations of various plans and ideas that have been looked at for the development of the property. One of the first ones was actually having a road that came up that driveway that that we discussed before. And that had significant challenges in part because obviously it created a significant amount of additional impact on the critical area. And so that as an example, I know that was something that was heard at the neighborhood meeting, was to figure out how to retain the historic and character and charm of Mine Hill Road. And we believe that this proposal certainly does that. It will enhance and protect critical areas on site. Will remove encroachments. There's quite a few encroachments into the critical area today. Obviously, there's the abandoned home. There's lots of impervious areas, things like that. They'll be removed. There's lots of invasive species within the critical area buffer state that will be removed and enhanced with native vegetation. And And then last but not least, it's consistent with Issaquah municipal code requirements for both the preliminary plat process as well as the critical areas variance and other applicable standards. We have been through a very long and thorough process with the city of Issaquah. Obviously, as I just mentioned, we went through some design changes looking at what's the best way to access the back portions of the western portions of the site to allow the development to occur. We've had multiple, obviously, neighborhood meetings. I think we had 2 neighborhood meetings. We had all sorts of pre-application meetings, certainly with the city and other things. We've been through a SEPA process. The SEPA process was completed, and of course, it was not appealed, so the SEPA decision is already complete. And then obviously we've been through a very, very thorough review process. The city retained peer reviewers. So not only did our consultants provide and city staff review, but also the city had peer reviewers that were also hired on behalf of the city to verify the critical areas, the traffic, as well as the geotechnical and mine hazard areas. It's important to note that the geotech and mine hazard were actually double peer reviewed, which is a requirement of the city of Issaquah. So there's been quite a bit of review and checking and double checking to ensure that this project meets the requirement. And then last but not least, I know the project was applied for, back in 2018, but before that, there was actually a moratorium that didn't allow us to apply for a period of time. And of course, as you mentioned, we also had a pandemic in the middle of this. So we certainly appreciate staff continuing to work through this with us and in trying to look at these issues and keep the project moving throughout this whole process. We have reviewed the staff report and we've reviewed the submitted exhibits, and we agree with the city's findings and conclusions. We understand that the older version of the tree preservation plan was originally included in the drawings found on Exhibit 1, and that was corrected with the corrected version of the plan, which I think was submitted to the record under Exhibit 27. So we wanted to make sure that that was clear. We have no objections to the proposed conditions of approval. So we agree with the conditions of approval that have been placed or proposed by staff in the staff report. There are a couple of questions I think that I did hear come up, and I'm not sure if you would like me to go ahead and try to address some of those now. If I can,
Yeah.
we're not sure. We heard the testimony from Ms. Rush as well as Ms. Porter about the potential of having an HPA permit from the Department of Fish and Wildlife. It's our understanding that because the outfalls are actually outside of the ordinary high water marks of the streams, that an HPA approval may not actually be required. But we certainly understand that it's something that we'll have to check with them. And but that is our understanding of the process. But we can certainly verify that, and we understand that that's the path city would like us to verify that with the Department of Fish and Wildlife. But certainly the design was to stay out of the ordinary high water mark to ensure that we met those particular requirements. And we certainly appreciate the city's analysis of that. We also understand that there were concerns that were raised by the Department of Fish and Wildlife as a response to the SEPA notification. It's important to note that they did not appeal the decision, the SEPA decision that was issued. And we understand that the city did thoroughly analyze the request that they made as far as like the classification of the stream, and including a review by the city's attorney, and agreed that the code as it's currently drafted today does not require it to be classified that way, because the way it's written, those codes may change certainly in the future, but as drafted, the code regulations are as they are today. And certainly, again, SEPA, to the extent that it could be used as a tool to look at those additional things, it certainly was not appealed by Fish and Wildlife as it came to that particular fact. You had asked a question about the critical areas variance. I do have some additional slides certainly that we could go through that if you like. The water in particular is all the critical area variances impacts that we're proposing are unavoidable, in the sense that you had to ask whether or not utilities could have simply be routed through Clark Street to avoid the impacts, certainly. And if you look at the site, and I'm happy to turn to those particular slides if you'd like to go through them, but we're happy to walk through why we believe that those impacts were unavoidable. And the reason why the critical areas variance was applied for, at a later time was because it was after discussion with city staff and the city's reviewers that they determined that this was needed and that such a variance was supportable, and that we actually then applied for that critical areas variance. But we're happy to walk through that again, and certainly I think in particular the water, it's required to be looped through the project. That's something that's a pretty standard practice, certainly, to ensure that there's proper fire flow and pressure to make sure that the communities can be safe and certainly have fire feeds as well with the adequate pressure. So that's one aspect, but we're certainly happy to walk through stormwater and the other impacts that are being requested through the critical areas variance process. That's a bit more of an overview. We're happy to dive into more detail on any and all of those points, but for now, maybe I should stop talking for a minute. And again, we really do appreciate staff. We have no objections to the proposed conditions of approval, and of course, we're available to answer any questions or to walk through any aspects of the project that you would like.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Lyons. Just to make sure I understood in my conversation with Ms. Porter earlier. So there is infrastructure that will be embedded in the new road that will go up to Clark, but there's also the need for the looping. Is that was the part I hadn't understood in advance of the hearing. So there's infrastructure both, through up into Mine Hill Creek, but then also, or not the creek, the road, Mine Hill Road, but then also looping up the other way.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the challenge is with a project is that once we know that these are requirements, then the issue then becomes, well, how do you best accomplish what's being requested? And because there was an existing driveway that connected Mine Hill Road to the west side of the property already, it represented probably a fairly elegant opportunity to be able to have those impacts in such a way that it did not create new impacts or significant new impacts, and allow the site. And then of course, the desire to maintain a pedestrian connection, if you will, between the west side of the property and Mine Hill Road. I think there were multiple opportunities there, but and certainly we can go into that in more detail if you like.
No, I think now that that's been clarified, I understand. I think then the question I believe I had related to categorization of critical areas, I think probably is it Ms. Apolka that is with you that would be the best person to call on?
Yes, and I believe that the exhibit that you're referring to is Exhibit 8.
Yes.
And I believe the page number that you're talking about is page, it looks like page 5, and it's the delineation using the Army Corps of Engineers 1987 Wetland Delineation Manual, and then there's a 2010 regional supplement.
Okay.
Is that what you're referring to? Okay.
That's what I had.
I'll go ahead and turn. I know Teresa Opolka has been having a few audio issues, but I will turn it over to her if she's available, and perhaps I don't know if you want to swear her in. Yeah.
Yeah, let's see if Ms. Apolka, are you?
Here.
Okay, I'm swearing you in. Do you swear affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
Great. And could you just spell your name clearly for the audio?
Sure. It's TERESA OPOLKA.
Great. Thank you for being here. Go ahead.
Sure. So it's a good question. The Wetland Delineation Manual, the Army Corps of Engineers still uses the 1987 manual. However, to address updates in the science, they created a update to the manual in 2010, and that addresses regional conditions as well as updates to the science. And so that is what was used to do the wetland delineation. And then the wetland categorization was done according to the Department of Ecology's 2014 wetland rating system. And that is where the buffers application gets applied.
Okay, okay, now I see it just further down the page on that same page. The wetlands were rated according to the rating system. So this particular 1987 manual, is this because it's Squawk Mountain? I guess I just don't run into that version of the manual very often. Is that what's going on?
So that is, yeah, so the distinction is between the categorization of the wetland and the delineation.
Right.
So the delineation of the wetland is still according to the 87 federal manual, is what the Corps of Engineers still requires. But then they have this regional update with a number of areas where they have fine-tuned the delineation process. And then the Department of Ecology's 2014 rating system, that's how we determine the buffers.
Got it.
That.
So
And yeah.
So the delineation is, where do we determine where this wetland is, versus now that we know where the wetland is based on the 3 different criteria that you used in looking at the hydric soils and the fauna, etc.
Correct.
This is now a category 3, and you can verify it is category 3, correct?
Yes, that is correct. And the city's consultant also reviewed that rating form and agreed with that.
Great. Okay. So I know this was peer reviewed, and this original study that was prepared was 2018, but there was no revisions to the critical areas report after peer review. Is that accurate?
So after peer review, I also ended up including the small ephemeral stream that is a little bit separated from the other stream and wetland area. So that was added after the peer review process. There's about a 12-inch wide stream that's a little bit of a seasonal seep then that infiltrates into the ground in that area.
And right, that's been pointed out, I guess. I'm trying to make sure I have all the information. Was there so there wasn't a supplement, or did the date on the report I show is the 2018 date, but is it that peer reviewed occurred and this is the final report and that was in 2018, or 2018 was the initial report, peer review occurred, and then the report was revised, but I don't have a revision date. I'm just trying to understand the process.
I would need to double check the dates on that. I believe that we addressed that revision then in the conceptual mitigation plan when we were reviewing the history of the wetlands, but I'm not sure if there was a revised report or not right offhand. Remember, Ken?
Yes, if I could answer.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Lyons.
Yes, we actually do have a mitigation plan that was provided in our application. It's dated. Let me just make sure I have it here. It's dated June 2020, and I'm just double checking the exhibits just to compare. So I guess what you're saying is that Exhibit 8 was the 2018, whereas the one that was submitted most recently that included everything was dated June 2020. May I share my screen?
Certainly.
Okay. Are you able to see my screen here?
I am. And so is this Exhibit 12 then, the conceptual mitigation plan?
I am double checking. Sorry, I'm toggling back between screens. Conceptual mitigation plan. Yes, it is. So this encompasses both the updated report as well as the proposed mitigation plan. So it would include an Exhibit 12, and I will open it and show the critical areas and existing conditions. Just ensure that it's on the right.
Got it. Okay, now I see. Okay,
Yeah,
excellent.
Stream B. So it's on page. It looks like page 1 of the updated report. So I think what you have is the original submittal, and then you have the updated one, which also includes the mitigation plan, which was one of the comments that came in from the peer reviewer that we were responding to. And I will defer, I think, to staff, Ms. Porter, if we've misstated that. So
No, I think I get it now. So there was the critical areas report 2018. Peer review comments, and then the conceptual mitigation plan was prepared, which incorporated the earlier information and then updated. I think I just got thrown off because it was changed the name to conceptual mitigation plan, but I did have an opportunity to review it and it is in the file. So thank you for clarifying that, Mr. Lyons.
okay.
Okay, and then Ms. Apoka, while I have you, I think just if you can verify, but clearly your understanding of the municipal code tracks with the city of Issaquah's understanding in terms of how we deal with salmonids not being present currently because of a fish barrier. You heard
Yes,
that discussion earlier.
Yeah, we've had that discussion, and that's how we understood it's being interpreted at this point.
Okay. And did you have any further thoughts on critical areas you wanted to share at this point, Ms. Apoka?
Nope, not at this point.
Great. Well, thank you for your comments. If you're able to stick around, members of the public may have some thoughts, and we might come back to you. But Mr. Lyons, did you have anyone else you wanted to call on at the moment before we see what members of the public are interested in testifying?
Well, if I may ask, Mr. Hingerstammer, I know that you had some questions for staff. Do you believe that we've missed anything that you had a question on? That I know that staff, I know they deferred a few items to the applicant to comment on, but I tried to take notes, but I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything that you may have wanted additional information on before.
Let's see. Do you happen to know the answer on whether notice of title related to the coal hazard areas needs to be separately included? I don't think we had a full answer on that, but
you know, I do think, and I do recall that, and I'll have to double check, and I don't know if staff have looked into it, but I know that when development does occur, any time there is a coal mine hazard area, I believe that there is at the building permit stage a document that they require to be recorded. And I just because I know I've been through this process before with the city of Issaquah, I am going a little bit by memory, but I will defer to staff. Is that because I believe it was a mine hazard? You know, it is required at the building permit stage, and it is recorded on title. Is that?
Ms. Sloman, do you maybe know the answer? We have Lucy Sloman. Let's get her sworn in. Ms. Sloman, do you swear affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
Thank you. And if you could just spell your name clearly for the audio and explain who you are, that'd be great.
Sure. I'm Lucy Sloman, Lucy, S as in Sam, Loman, Land Development Manager.
I figured if anyone knew the answer, you would know the answer to this one because you have done this work in Issaquah for a long time. So thank you, Ms. Sloman. If you happen to have an answer to that question, that'd be great.
Yes, we well, in fact, as kind as you are about my memory, Valerie and I were actually spelunking the code while the applicant was speaking. And section 1810-460 requires notice for any critical area on property that's being built on. And so because coal mines are considered a critical area, it would be required to have some kind of notice.
Got it. So I think there was a recommended condition of approval that dealt with the other types of critical areas, but would staff, should I just insert this into that recommended condition were I to approve this? Obviously, I need to think about all that first, but would that make sense, Ms. Lemon?
Certainly, although as Mr. Hearing Examiner knows, if the condition wasn't modified, we would still have the authority to do it, but it is always a good reminder to make sure that we don't overlook something that's required.
Great, thank you. And while I have you, did you have anything else you wanted to share, Ms. Sloman, before we move on?
Well, the one other thing I would just clarify, I was unclear, Mr. Examiner, related to steep slopes. I just wanted to make sure that it was clear that there are a couple of different factors that can result in a steep slope not being regulated. One of them is, excuse me, the topic that you and Ms. Porter discussed of man-made steep slopes, but also steep slopes that have less than 20 feet in vertical gain are also not regulated.
Okay.
So I think both of those factors probably came into play with the 4 steep slopes that are not regulated.
Okay, great. Thank you for
I
clarifying.
believe that's in the staff report, but I just wanted to make sure that the record was clear in terms of our conversation.
Great, thank you. I think it is now. Thank you. And Mr. Lyons, did you have something further you wanted to speak to before we move on?
No, I just wanted to point just for we do have the geotechnical consultants that did review this, and they can certainly provide additional information in this regard should it be required, or if you would like, Mr. Hearing Examiner.
I think I understand it. So I think probably the best at this point was, why don't we go to members of the public to see what questions, additional comments may come up, and then we'll look to those with expertise to respond. Does that make sense to you, Mr. Lyons?
I'll defer to you. Yes, works for me.
Okay. Let's do that. Okay, so let me find. Okay, so the first name I see is a call-in user identified as number 2, and there's a 0629 in the number. If we can unmute that person first. So if you're the call-in number whose phone number starts in 360629, can you hear me?
Yes, I think that would be me.
Okay, and you are?
Leslie Grossruck. I also finally connected online, so I've been watching on my computer as well, but I hadn't hung up my phone yet.
Excellent. Were you interested in testifying today, Ms. Grossruck?
No, I'm mostly just observing the procedure. I own a residence on Mine Hill Road, right across from the proposed project, and so I'm very interested in the process and any information that I have concern about. I must say I appreciate whenever I've had questions that I've put to Valerie. She's been very responsive, and so right now I'm just taking notes, and I might submit some questions afterward if something comes up in my mind.
Okay, just to be clear, unless I leave the record open for some reason, there won't be an opportunity for additional comments that I would consider as a citizen that wants to stay abreast of what's happening. You can, of course, always reach out to city staff with questions, but any comments after this hearing are not ones that I'm going to see. I just want to be clear about that, okay?
Okay, well, I appreciate that. I've never, participated in anything like this before, and a lot of instructions don't come my way as to, each step by step and, how that works. So I appreciate your information.
Okay, well, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Great. So then the next name I see is Ashley Anderson. We can unmute.
Yep. Hi, this is Ashley.
Hi, were you interested in testifying, Ms. Anderson?
I have a question. Does that mean I'm testifying?
Yeah, I'll just swear you in just to be safe. Do you swear affirm to tell the truth in the testimony you give here today?
I do.
Great, thank you for being here. And could you just clearly spell your name for the audio?
Ashley Anderson, Anderson.
Great, thank you for being here. Go ahead, Ms. Anderson.
I live on Mine Hill Road. My question is, this is kind of I guess I attended the environmental meeting as well and heard that there was going to be news of expanding the road on Mine Hill Road. And that's the first time I've heard of that. And now it's being brought up again. I'm curious if I could get some more information on how the road is going to be expanded. It right now is kind of a one-way road, and I'm curious as to what the impact is going to be.
Okay, great. We will, once we check in with other members of the public, we'll turn it back to get additional information on what is proposed in terms of expansion of Mine Hill Road and what the potential impacts might be. Okay,
Yep, thank you.
great. Thank you. The next name I see is a Joey McFerrin. Joey McFerrin, are you there? You might have to unmute.
I've unmuted Joey McFerrin, but I do not hear any verbal
Me
information.
neither. Okay, so why don't we try to leave him unmuted just for a moment while we also unmute call-in user 3, and if Mr. McFerrin or Ms. McFerrin, whoever that may be, pipes up, we'll hear from them. But for now, call-in user 3 is someone whose phone number begins with 206-930. If that person on the line?
Yes, I am.
And who is this?
This is Joey McFerrin, actually.
Oh.
I'm logged in on a computer that doesn't seem to have a microphone. I'm out of town.
Excellent.
And-
We solved the problem. Were you interested in testifying?
No, I'm not.
Okay, thank you, Ms. McFerrin, for watching. So I think then that is those are the members of the public. I believe everyone that is listed otherwise on the panelists are all associated with either city staff or the applicant team. I'm getting nods. Thank you, Ms. Bear. So at this point, then, if we can turn to Mr. Lyons again to try to get information on Ms. Anderson's question in particular about expanding Mine Hill Road. How will that work? What are the potential impacts? And I know you've got some folks with engineering expertise, but whoever you think is the best person to talk to, go ahead, Mr. Lyons.
Thank you, and thank you for your question, Ashley. I think the city of Issaquah is requiring that we do some level of frontage improvements to Mine Hill Road southwest. And this was a topic that we discussed, obviously, with quite a bit of interest, because I think that we routinely heard concerns about just keeping the charm of the street and the like. And I think that the city's concern was just making sure that there was perhaps some additional parking and making sure that the road width would be able to support certainly any sort of safe vehicle access around there. I'm happy to share my screen, and if you'd like to, we can kind of look at the frontage of Mine Hill Road. But I first would probably ask Maher if you're there. Maher is the project engineer, and so I don't know if you want to swear him in, but I'm happy to share my screen if you'd like him to walk through the frontage improvements. And I can also provide, if you like, kind of how we arrived at sort of coming to a compromise that would work to sort of preserve the street. I do have some of the information that we submitted that the city considered in the road standards variance process that we went through, because obviously we're not doing the full set of improvements that the city code would generally require. And we went through that road standards variance where perhaps the expansion of the road would have been quite a bit more. The dedication of the right of way would have been quite a bit more than it otherwise would have been. And certainly that was in part, Ashley, to try to keep the character of the street and just provide for these safety improvements and the like. But Mr. Examiner, is it okay if I turn it over to Maher and share my screen?
Yes. So, Mr. Judy, thank you for being here, sir. Do you swear affirm to tell the truth and the testimony you give here today? Oh, one sec.
I do.
And
Sorry, I had to unmute.
no problem. Could you just clearly spell your name for the audio, Mr. Judy?
I can. Maher Judy, M-A-H-E-R, and last name is J-O-U-D-I.
Great. And you're one of the engineers that worked on this proposal?
I am the project civil on this project since 2014.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Judy.
Thank you. Thanks, Ken, for putting this up. I do want to reiterate what Ken had stated, that this project initially, the initial call from the city of Issaquah was to do full frontage improvements, which would have improved it with a curb, gutter, planter strip and sidewalk. We did hear the neighbor concerns, as did the city, and the only way to change that requirement was to go through the road variance process. What we landed on was expanding the pavement area slightly in order to achieve 20 feet of drivable area in front of the site, and expand the pavement slightly more in other areas between the proposed lots to get some on-street parking, to avoid some of the problems that Mine Hill Road sees in people parking in the drivable area. So as you can see on the screen, the gray hatch area is the expansion area. The area that's white is the existing roadway. So the expansion is at its greatest, where we are not providing parking, probably 1.5 to 2 feet. And then the boxes that you see by the sewer manhole and between lots 1 and 2 and between 2 and 3 are expanded pavement areas that allow for on-street parallel parking. So we felt, as did the city, that this was the greatest compromise to maintaining the character of Mine Hill Road, as well as providing for adequate width to provide emergency services through the site into Mine Hill Road. That's really the gist of it. And I trust that would answer the public's question, but I'm also here to answer more questions if what I said created more questions.
No, so thank you, Mr. Judy. So the other image that's listed as Exhibit A, right-of-way frontage, I think that really shows it. And those hatchlight areas are essentially the expansion of the street is just on the west side and generally right in front of these existing properties.
Yes.
You're not expanding Mine Hill Road Southwest further or, off-site that I can't see here, right?
No,
It's just in front of these particular parcels and that limited area. Is that right?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Great. Thank you for explaining that, Mr. Judy. Let's see. I'm trying to think if we needed to hear from you on any other issues, but just the steep slopes, because we talked about it. Did you have anything further you wanted to add on in relation to the steep slopes, Mr.?
Ms. Sloman actually stole my thunder. I was gonna chime in when it was my turn to speak, that those slopes along the stream buffer were exempted due to the height of those slopes. The code does state that anything under 20 feet is an exempted slope. So that was why those areas were hatched, but were considered exempt. The area that is within on the west side of the stream did not meet the exemption criteria, and so that area was not, and we are showing a buffer off that slope. That slope buffer, however, is encompassed in the larger stream and wetland buffer, so inconsequential to the site development.
Great, thank you for explaining that. Nothing then further you wanted to add, Mr. Judy?
No, just here to answer questions if any arise.
Great, thank you, sir. I think the other question, I'm just trying to go through all my notes, make sure I didn't miss anything. So that answered, hopefully, the question that Ms. Peterson had. The other question I had to do with critical areas, and there was somewhere in the critical areas report, I believe, and sorry if I didn't ask this earlier, but there was discussion of credit related to impervious surface removal credits. I think there were about 8,200 square feet of credit associated with impervious surface removal. I just haven't run into that very much. If someone, either Ms. Porter or a member of the applicant team wanted to speak to that concept, that would be helpful. Or Mr. Judy, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Ken, do you want to speak to it, Ken? It's on our plan, so I thought it may be best for me to.
I'm fine. Do you want me to share my screen? I will share that same plan. Is that what you would like, Mark?
I think sheet C1 has a color-coded version. Yeah, exactly. So as part of the averaging and the mitigation and reduction, we looked at a lot of different factors. And as Ms. Apolka had mentioned, the stream buffer has been heavily impacted over the years, and it's our project goal to restore that in the areas that we can. So this area over behind lot 5 is where the existing house is. And that area is impacting the wetland and stream buffer that's in that area. So we'll be removing those impervious surfaces and replanting that area to restore the buffer there. We are taking credit for removal of the concrete and paved trail that is, well, that's currently a driveway that's going through the.
I apologize. I will put it back up on the screen. Sorry about that.
Keeping me on my toes, Ken.
Yeah, it's good.
We are removing that the paved area and concrete area that's running through the stream buffer now that used to serve as a driveway for that home. So we're taking credit for the removal, but we're also being docked for the impact of replacing that after we install the sewer and water through there. A portion of that will be paved because it does provide access to the city for the pipe inlet of Mine Hill Creek that crosses. So that area will be repaved after the installation of utilities, and then the trail continued that we talked about being used for both safe walk and for access to these sensitive areas. So the impervious surfaces that are being removed are that home, the trail, and then as well as the shed on the backside of lot 3. So per city code, those do get credit in your buffer averaging and buffer reduction and restoration areas.
Okay. Great, thank you for explaining that.
And if I may, Mr. Hearing Examiner?
Yeah, Mr. Lyons, go ahead.
In, I think in Exhibit 12, actually, I think it's Exhibit 13, there is a clearer map, I think, that describes the hashing of where the exact impervious areas that are being removed. It's Exhibit 13, and it's sheets W2.
Sorry, one more time on the sheet number, Mr. Lyons.
Yeah, it's so it's Exhibit 13, and if you like, I can quickly share my screen here to point it out here. Are you able to see my screen?
Yeah.
So this is Exhibit 13. And if you go down, you'll see the impervious surface removals, and they're hashed a certain way. So you can see where the impervious surfaces are being removed, for which there was a credit applied as allowed by the code.
Okay, so this is sheet
W2. Yeah.
W2, and yeah, if you look, so there's the wetland buffer reduction. It shows 1,548 square feet, and then 720 square feet of replacement, and then the impervious surface removal credit. When you add all that together, it works out. Is that the basic concept?
That's right. And it's important to note that there are actually, even though it looks like one large buffer, there's actually buffers within the buffer here. So this is the wetland buffer here, for which that existing house, which is coming down, there's a credit applied for that. Whereas on the east side of the stream, for example, the portions behind lot 3, that's actually stream buffer for which the impervious surfaces credit is applied. So there's a little bit of, so they had to be calculated differently to make sure that those requirements were met.
Got it. So stream buffer reduction, replacement, and then the removal credit on the east side of the stream, because I assume you need to be in the same general area. And then the trail is discussed as well.
That's right.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Is useful to help understand W2 in Exhibit 13. Great. I think that then answered that question that I had. I'm just trying to make sure I didn't miss anything in my notes. Go through again. Anything further you wanted to share while I'm quickly looking through my notes, Mr. Lyons, or anyone else you wanted to call on?
Well, the only other thing that I would mention is that the document, which was my PowerPoint presentation, which was submitted as, I believe, Exhibit 30, was it 31?
31 is what I had it as.
Yeah, so there are additional slides. They are similar to what Ms. Porter from the city had already presented regarding, the justification for the critical areas variance, but we do have those slides. I think that we've covered most of that material, but to the extent you'd like to go through any other aspect, we're certainly happy to do so.
No, I think it's fine. I can review them at my leisure when I receive them. So we'll make sure if you get them to Ms. Bear, she'll make sure that my office gets a copy. And then Ms. Porter, did you have anything further you wanted to add? Actually, I had one more question for staff. I don't believe I got, so I know there was a lot of peer review that occurred. I probably wouldn't understand the engineering peer review all that well, but were there any documents that were prepared as part of the critical areas peer review, for instance? I just don't have them in the record. I want to make sure that we have a complete record. Does
Yes.
staff have any issue with just, we can make Exhibit 32 peer review comments, and it can be all the peer reviews. We'll lump them in and I'll label them, but that way just were there an appeal, it's all in one place for the court. Does that make sense to you, Ms. Porter?
Yes, and I'll provide those.
Thank you. Okay. And now that I'm done talking, Ms. Porter, did staff have anything further they wanted to add before we end today's hearing?
No, I do not.
Great, thank you. So, Mr. Lyons, did that make sense what I just said there? We're gonna just, purposes of a complete record, include those so that I have them in my file?
Yes, that makes perfect sense. Thank you for doing that.
Okay, well, good. Well, then, based on that, I do not see any reason the record needs to be left open beyond today. So just get the additional materials to Ms. Bear, and my staff and I will begin working on this. We will take everything into consideration that was received, as well as the public testimony that was heard today, and I will produce a decision here in the next 10 business days. So thank you to members of the public. Thank you to city staff and the applicant team for taking the time to answer my many questions and to provide a thorough review of the proposal. So I think with that, we're done. I wish everyone safety and good health as the world continues to be a strange place, but seems to be getting better. So with that, we'll end today's meeting. Thanks, everybody.